Hey, second graders. We are going to read Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle's Magic Chapter 6, Part 4 of The Heedless Breaker, where we're going to see what happens to little Miss Sharon. Sharon's usual custom in the morning was to jerk out her bureau drawers so hard that they almost always came all the way out and dumped everything on the floor. This morning, she went over to her bureau to get some clean socks, reached for the drawer handles, and was surprised to see how slowly and carefully her fingers were grasping them. She tried to jerk out the drawers, but her arms moved back slowly, and the drawer pulled out gently and just far enough for her to be able to reach her socks without any trouble. When she had finished, she tried to give the drawer a shove, but her hand wouldn't come away. It pushed the drawer all the way in, carefully and slowly. When Sharon sat down in the little rocking chair, she put on her socks. She found that she moved slowly and as though controlled by strings, like a puppet. Usually Sharon jammed her feet into her socks so hard that they often her toes would go poking right through the end. This morning her foot wouldn't poke. It moved forward slowly and gracefully, and Sharon found herself pulling on her socks with as much care as her mother put on nylon stockings. Her socks looked nice too. The tops were turned down and even the heels on her heels, not in the front as they often were. It actually didn't take Sharon any longer to dress this new careful way, but she didn't have to stop to get other socks after poking holes in the first one, and she didn't have to stop and cry and rub her knees or her toes or elbows after tripping or over bumping into or knocking down the furniture. She saw her old golf ball on the desk and carried it down to breakfast, but she didn't bounce it on the stair because she was moving slowly and had a hard time to remember what happened before, how it bounced and broke in her mother's crystal chandelier. When she walked slowly into breakfast, carefully pulling out the chair, she sat down gracefully without bumping the table leg and daintily unfolded her napkin with her mother and her father, and they looked at each other and beamed. Breakfast was a gracious, quiet, pleasant meal, and the French toast was delicious. After breakfast, Sharon washed the dishes for her mother, and her new, slow, careful way of doing things made it seem like an easy job. She was though in no time with nothing She was through in no time with nothing broken and everything put away into the right place. Her mother was so surprised and so pleased when she opened the icebox door and found that Sharon had not, as her usual practice, put in the big plates with the tiny dabs of food on them, had not balanced the syrup jug on the jug of milk, had not crowded things so when Mrs. Rogers opened the door, at least three dishes jumped out and crashed into her. Sharon was sweeping the back porch, and Mrs. Rogers peeked out the door and watched her in amazement. Instead of standing in the middle of the porch and sweeping from side to side with big, careless sweeps, so that dog bones, dust, crumbs, and leaves went flying into every direction, including her hair, Sharon was sweeping with small, careful strokes, and everything was in a neat little pile. Her mother tapped on the door and waved at her. Sharon slowly raised her head and smiled. After a while, when Mary Lou, Molly O'Toole, and Susan Gray came over to roller skate, Mrs. Rogers was terribly pleased to see that Sharon was the most graceful skater of all. Mrs. Rogers used to be afraid to watch Sharon skate because she skated like a double greased lightning and banged into trees, tripped over stones, and fell flat on her face, and used to do very dangerous, heedless things like skating down a hill backwards. Now she sailed down the street on one foot, as airy and graceful as a leaf. She even won when they had a race because her strokes were so long that she watched where she was going and avoided rough places. When she came in for lunch, Mrs. Rogers almost fainted to see her carefully unlatch and open the gate, then close it after. She was carrying her roller skates and put them on the hall closet where they belonged instead of tossing them on the porch. At lunch, instead of gulping a mouthful of hot soup, giving a yell and spraying it all over the kitchen, Sharon waited a little for the soup to cool, then ate it slowly and daintily. When she had finished, she and her mother, you know, she said to her mother, "You know, mother, I feel so funny today, sort of slow and floaty, and everything seems easy. I don't bump into things, I haven't broken a single thing, and I can roller skate just beautifully. Mrs. Rogers said, I've noticed it, Sharon. You move slowly and gracefully like a queen. It must be that you had a very restful sleep last night. Sharon said, I think it must be. She kissed her mother and went upstairs to change her clothes. Instead of whamming through the swinging door so that it clanged against the wall on the other side, clumping up the stairs and crashing open the door to her room, Sharon slipped through the swinging door, went up the stairs on tiptoes, and gently clicked open the door of her room. Mrs. Rogers had tears of joy in her eyes and got out all of her nice little knickknacks and put them back on the shelves and tables. She even called Mrs. Green, explained the wonderful change in Sharon, and invited her over for tea. Mrs. Green came, but she approached the Rogers house warily and with great caution as though it were a bomb. Sharon was just leaving for the moving picture, but she stopped and greeted Mrs. Green, apologizing again for breaking her glasses, and was so quiet, gentle, and charming that Mrs. Green couldn't believe it was Sharon, and thought that probably it was really a secret twin sister. When Mrs. Rogers explained about Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle's magic powder, Mrs. Green was terribly interested and asked if she could borrow a little on her husband when he played golf. If he misses the shot, she told Mrs. Rogers, he roars like a lion and breaks the clubs over his knees. He's broken 2 sets already, and it's only April. Mrs. Rogers ran upstairs to get the magic powder because she knew she wouldn't need it anymore. And that is the end of that chapter. All right. We will begin the next chapter next time.